When we think about moral issues, we tend to think that everything comes down to arguments. Whether we have a good argument for or against that specific position. What I want to talk about today is the distance that exists between this ideal case of this rational creature who thinks about the arguments and acts based on those arguments, and the actual real person that in practice acts or tries to act morally. And I believe there is a gap, and there are things that are out of our control. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I guess it helps us to sympathize with those positions that we do not agree with. And for our case, it would be natalism. Why is there a gap? Now, this is something, it's a little bit difficult to talk about it because it's offending to us, because we tend to think that, hey, we are that reasonable person who really considers everything and acts based on that reason, and we're trying not to ignore anything, but that's not actually what happens. So I will try to talk about my own personal life and my own personal experience, but I guess you will find something similar in yourself too. At least I hope so, that you can find one. Again, we like to think that we are considering everything, we're looking into all issues, but that's not true actually. The sensitivity that we have toward different issues largely depends on our experiences, on our personality, and our past history. For example, if you are someone who has been dealing with animals, you are more sensitive toward animal rights. If you're someone who's had issues with his parents or life in general, you might be more sensitive toward the concepts of antinatalism, for example. Or if you're someone who had an abortion, for example, you will be more sensitive toward those concepts. And these are things that we have no control over. So the things that we focus on, the things that we put in higher priority in our mind, is not completely in our control. We put different weights to these different matters, and those weights actually will affect how we act upon them. Because in the end, when it comes to acting, and that's the second part that produces that gap, when it comes to acting, we have different priorities, and we act upon those priorities. And these past experiences affect how we decide what to do in specific positions. So even if we put that focus part aside and say, okay, we are considering everything equally, we are putting enough time in everything equally, we're putting enough reason and logic and rigor into all these different topics equally. When it comes to acting, again, things differ on these different positions. How effective are we when we come to a position? How effective are we when we want to act upon a specific value? How important it is for us to stand up for a specific value. And this brings me to this second part of this gap, the acting part, where again, the priorities that we have for different actions again depends on things that we have not complete control over them. And that's, I guess, the reason that sometimes we see weird combinations. We see antinatalists who are not vegan. You're listening to one of them. You hear vegans who are not antinatalists. You see people who have very powerful positions on some specific moral issues, but they don't have the same vigor on, for example, antinatalism. So how can we explain that again? It comes down to priorities. How effective you are for that specific topic depends on your personality, depends on your past experiences and your upbringing and your culture. And understanding this will again helps us to sympathize better with these different positions. Now, look, again, I have to emphasize here that I'm not talking about a kind of subjectivism. I'm not saying that they have the right position. So when I say that, okay, I'm not a vegan, but I'm anti-natalist, I'm not saying that the vegans are wrong. I truly believe that the veganism is the correct position on animal rights. I do believe that. And I'm not lying here. Like when I think about the arguments, I'm truly convinced. I sincerely believe that the species of different animals should not make a difference in how we treat them. So if we don't kill and eat human beings, then we shouldn't also kill and eat other animals. That makes total sense to me. But why don't I act on it? And that's the big question. That's the question that I ask myself too. And that's why I'm making this video, because I guess we should focus also on these on this gap that exists between the ideal case and what actually happens, because it helps us to understand these weird combinations that sometimes we see on moral issues. Sometimes someone is so focused on one specific topic, but they completely ignore this other one, which seems also equally important. Now, so when we ask, why is that? Why is it that someone like me, who's not a vegan, who understands the position, who agrees with position, but he doesn't act upon it? Now, the answer again is simple. You say, okay, you're not strong enough. You don't have the virtue, the good character to act upon that. You're weak. And I agree with that. I am weak in that sense. And I can't, it's difficult for me to act upon that position. I cannot stand up for that specific value, for human rights. I can't stand up for that. I cannot defend that. But is that something that's completely in my control? Because again, the history and the culture, it all affects how I act on my beliefs. So, for example, if someone has been living in a family who are vegan, someone who's been living somewhere where they have vegan foods all the time, obviously they're in a better position to join the vegan community. They're in a better position to act upon veganism if they come to believe that veganism is true. If someone is living in a society where the vegan position is not so common, even if you come to understanding that that position is the correct and the right thing to do, it would be more difficult for you to act upon that correct position than someone who's been living in a vegan family for years. That doesn't justify. That doesn't say that, hey, then okay, if you're not, you don't have the upbringing, then it's okay for you to do the immoral action. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have to take this into consideration just to have a little bit of more empathy with the other person who's dealing with that specific moral issue. In the same sense, someone who doesn't want to have kids is much closer to an anti-natalist position. Yeah, let me go back to my personal experience again. So when I get here, when I focus on the fact that I am an anti-natalist, but I'm not a vegan, it helps me to understand those who are vegan but are not anti-natalists. I don't put myself in that righteous position to think, hey, I'm the right one, defending my position on anti-natalism. Because if I do that, then I will try to defend in the same way my position on veganism. And I guess that will lead to some logical inconsistency in myself. And I don't want that. So I guess to prevent that internal contradiction, sometimes people do that. You see, so when someone doesn't want to be an anti-natalist because of, those past histories, they cannot act upon it. What they do is they go back to that ideal case and try to defend that position logically. But that can only lead to logical inconsistencies. Because again, if we agree that there is an objective fact to this matter, then you cannot defend both of them at the same time. So it would be the better position in this case would be to not be a logical, inconsistent human being, but rather accept that that position is correct and just accept the fact that you're not up to it, that you are doing something bad. Now and this is where that past history comes in. Because when you think that you're doing something bad, it has a weight on you. Now, whether you act upon that weight, whether that weight is strong enough for you to act, depends on that past history, right? Depends on your character. But if you keep that weight long enough, after a while, that becomes part of your character, and that will start to change who you are. So this is how I'm dealing with my own issue regarding veganism, because I'm really bothered with this, right? I know, because I'm also someone who's I really love animals, and I have this conflict with myself regarding this topic. That even though I know that's right, but I don't do it. But it also helps me to understand the other positions, natalist positions too. But the problem is that when I talk to natalists, I sometimes don't see this kind of behavior, that they say, okay, I agree with that. I agree that anti-natalism is correct, but it's just too difficult for me to do the right thing. What usually happens is that they go back to that ideal case of they try to reason for natalism or against anti-natalism. They fail. They fail miserably. So it would be better for them to say, okay, yes, we agree with that, but there's nothing, at least initially, there's nothing wrong with it knowing that you're doing a bad thing. That's the first step. I believe you cannot actually switch immediately from one position to another position unless you're a very strong-willed person. But again, the weight that an immoral action puts on you, the fact that it has on you, the priority that you put for it, it's not completely in our control. So, I guess this video was for me, I would say, rather than for you, because I was just trying to think out loud and try to basically come to peace with myself on how to exactly understand this conflict that I have internally. I hope I can become a vegan one day, and just let me know if you have had similar experiences, similar conflicts. If what I'm saying makes sense, I'm making some predictions. I hope that if someone stays enough in the state of guilt, then that guilt might become strong enough to change their behavior. But I don't know. Just let me know your experience and any tips that you might have regarding these sort of conflicts.